I have 7 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. Mr. Van, will you please call the roll?
Councilor Beard?
Present.
Councilor Urban?
Here.
Youth Representative?
Here.
Councilor Fleck?
Here.
Councilor Merryday?
Here.
Councilor Savage?
Here.
Councilor Stinnett?
Here.
Mayor Solsky?
Here. I'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Items to be added to the agenda. I see none. Appearance of interested citizens for items not on the agenda. I just want to give a quick reminder to be respectful to one another. No negative or positive outbursts if you support or do not. Be conscientious to everyone so we can all hear. This is a time for citizens' comment on all items not listed on the agenda for a maximum of 30 minutes. Individual speakers must be recognized by the presiding officer, provide their name and address, and will be allowed up to 5 minutes or less with council approval. Comments regarding any matter scheduled for public hearing may be provided only in that hearing. Comments on agenda items may be taken prior to council discussion on that item. The council will not engage in any discussion or make any decisions based on public comment at this time. However, the council may take comments under advisement for discussion and action at a future council meeting. Venice Mason.
Venice Mason, Old City Hall Building, downtown Cottage Grove, Unit 3. Thank you to the council for giving me a moment to speak to you today. The last time that I spoke here, I said I would put the truth to the lie that has been perpetuated through a police report that is done through a biased lens, the lie that has been perpetuated, however false it is, throughout the community. I'm grateful that the investigation is over. I'm very grateful and wanted to thank the city for banning people who committed assault from the library. It is going to be wonderful to have 90 days of peace this summer. There's many, many things that have been happening in our community for a long time. And the last time I spoke to you about anything to do with the Southern Poverty Law Center is when the Laskys lived in town. And they were shucking and jiving up here, acting like they were just anybody else's mom and pop, and not an organized group of hate criminals convicted for wreaking damage throughout our communities. Watch the news lately. Glendale, California, a school district I attended, huge riot out in front of the school board meeting. All over America, there is a rise in anti-government extremism, hate groups targeting specifically at this time trans, immigrants, and all types of other divisive unions. I understand that there's people in this community who will believe what they read and not do their due diligence. I thank you for putting body cameras on the police, but I ask you, how many of you have reviewed the body camera yourself? How many of you are using the new tools that we've put into place to handle this? I provided to each one of the counselors a portion of the policy to prevent, expose, and counter and remedy hate and anti-government extremism. And as it says, effective and strategic policies are crucial, but we cannot legislate, regulate, tabulate, or prosecute racism, hatred, or extremism out of existence. These policy recommendations are but one piece of the larger effort to counter extremism. If you are unfamiliar with a bias lens, it's time to do your due diligence and learn exactly what that is. Happy Pride Month, by the way. I look forward to seeing what Cottage Grove is putting together to celebrate this very important month for people who have rights and protections like every other citizen. I hope that we plan something. I hope that we get a handle on this before the Proud Boys march down the street again. That's already happened. And I fear that it will happen again while we all stick our heads in the sand and say, hey, the First Amendment, man, but there are laws against this. And the actual truth is, other people's rights end where mine begin. And the Constitution is the line that separates us. And it's very, very important that we get real clear on what's happening. So if you have any questions or you need any training on bias perspective or what hate incidents are, I would encourage you to give a call to the U.S. Department of Justice Federal Bureau of Investigation, Ryan Dwyer, the supervisory senior resident agent of the Eugene and Medford resident agencies, has stated clearly and publicly that this type of activity in small rural towns all across Oregon is his #1 priority, and I'm sure that he'll be willing. Now, we've had a lot of talk about anonymous letters in this council. I received one too. It was a death threat. That's the kind of community we live in. 2 nights ago, I came home to being flyered with more bigoted and horrible, hateful things on my doorstep. I've had firecrackers thrown at me so that I hit the sidewalk thinking I'm being shot. My friends and my relatives have suffered no end of persecution in this community by people sitting in this very room. Many of you also sitting in this room have worked behind the scenes and on the front lines to counter it. And we have made a very horrible list. In addition to the information I provided with solid policy suggestions, I want you to know that in Eugene, Oregon, this October, protesters carried semi-automatic rifles and threw rocks and smoke bombs at us. I was there, standing in front of my post-op trans child, my gender fluid grandchild who is indigenous, protecting them from armed, masked people with semi-automatic rifles throwing sticks, rocks, and smoke bombs at us. What happened in your community center would have been a lot worse if 4 also alter-able people hadn't stepped in. If you don't know what's happening, and if you choose to not do something about it, you deserve what the Proud Boys are going to do to this community, and it will be on your heads. The people in this very room are associated with them. They are convicted insurrectionists. Take a stand. Celebrate Pride Month. Come up with an anti-hate policy and affirm diversity in your community and stop sweeping it under the rug because nobody believes what they said.
Bill Christensen.
Bill Christensen, 1337 Elm Avenue, Cottage Grove, Oregon, 972-424. I only have 5 minutes, actually 4 minutes and 56 seconds. But I wanted to talk about the incident that happened at the library. I know we're kind of beating a dead horse, but I was there, and I wanted to read briefly the police report and then read a report that was given to one of my friends who was involved in the situation. So the police report says, Officer Jared Butler, I was on duty on April 27th, uniform patrol. During my patrol shift, I was provided USB driver containing the library security video footage displaying the involved incident in this case, which occurred on Tuesday, April 25th, 2023. The security video, this is from Officer Jared Butler, the security video did display Venice Mason standing up from her seated position near the end of the meeting, raising both her arms up and placing both her hands in the thumbs down gesture. The video has no audio component attached to it, but Mason appears to be speaking while standing to the point that an elderly female who was seated next to Mason ultimately using her left hand to touch Mason in a motion to get her to sit down. The elderly female was identified as Barbara Evans. Evans was ignored, and Mason continued to stand and verbalize. Secord, who was interviewed initially on scene on April 25th, advised he was a sergeant of arms, which is described as a position to keep order during the meeting. Secord can then be seen walking towards Mason and engaging Mason verbally for what appears to be a motioning of Mason to leave the meeting. It appeared Mason refused to leave the meeting as requested when asked by Secord and another elderly male. Secord then appeared to physically attempt to escort Mason from the room, which was physically countered by Mason in the flailing of her arms from the attempted escort hold of her arm. I'm going to skip down. Amy Meriday, at one point falls to the ground by no force observed on video other than her own. It appears that Meriday lost her footing and fell to the ground dramatically. Augsbury also engaged in the exchange of physical contact with Secord and others, but did not appear injured during my interview in which she reported she was assaulted. Mason is then seen leaving the conference room and runs from the interior of the library building while glass bell holds both entry doors not allowing anyone the ability to exit the conference room momentarily, other than Meriday, who followed Mason outside shortly afterwards. As Mason ran outside, she did not appear to possess a dislocated shoulder as she had originally reported on the 911 line which I had received. Mason ultimately recanted that complaint while I was on scene and stated that she now possibly only had a torn muscle. The South Lane Fire and Rescue Team arrived on scene, and at Mason's request, she was transported to the Cottage Grove Hospital. After review of the security video footage, it appears that the majority of all parties listed in this case at one point in the incident caused unwanted physical contact with one another and caused public alarm from their tumultuous behavior and actions. And he says, rather than cite everyone in lieu of the custody, I believe the best course of community policing action is for all parties involved to be trespassed from the City Grove Library at 700 East Gibbs. This is a report handed to one of my friends from the city manager's office. This is from Jake Boone. Dear Mr. Gangle, this letter is to inform you that you are prohibited from entering onto the premises, including building and parking lot of the Cottage Grove Community Center, for a 90-day period beginning on the date of this letter. Any violation of this prohibition will result in citation and arrest. So he says, Jake says, my friend was willfully annoying, harassing, intimidating, or threatening another person, and for behaving in a loud, boisterous, offensive, indecent, or disruptive manner, using abusive or threatening language or gestures, fighting or threatening to fight, running, pushing, shoving, or throwing things, forcibly shoving Shiloh Gaskell, an identified woman, and Amy Meriday. The police report said nothing about this. And yet Jake Boone's report, really the bottom line is, I have two friends involved in this incident. They both got 90 days. And Venice Mason, Amy Meriday, and another person got 3 days, total 3 days. So there appears to me to be an agenda. It's pretty clear to me there's an agenda. And I'm standing up because I don't like agendas.
Over 5 minutes. Just give him a couple seconds.
Okay.
Or you need to finish up.
Anyway, thank you for listening. There's a lot of information here, but I was there, and everybody at our meetings complied to our code of conduct. Everybody does, except 3 people, and we're tired of it.
Thank you. Dwayne Toddy.
Dwayne Caddy, 77561, Highway 99, unincorporated Cottage Grove. I appreciate the conversation outside. Councilor Meriday, that was a beautiful conversation. Understand each other, you talk about it tonight. Councilor Savage, I appreciate the time outside. Respectful conversation. Forgive me, I'm going 4 hours of sleep, working all night. I got to work tonight. I had to be here to speak. I don't appreciate counselors who walk by me and call me a schmuck and then flip me off. And that was Counselor Fleck, and I'm going to do a public records request to pull the video to get the evidence. That's uncalled for. He should not have done that, and there were witnesses to that. We've had a conversation prior, and we both know that we can have conversations such as the conversation I had with Counselor Meriday and Counselor Savage, and that's what we should do. So I'm here today. I'm concerned that Assistant City Manager Jake Boone notified Captain Marsh that my signs would be a violation of some code, and he pulled me aside and asked me not to come in with them, and if I did, I'd be trespassed. I decided to put them in my car because it's more important to speak here than it is to cause a scene, and that wasn't I think my point's getting across. I'll have a T-shirt made. I had this T-shirt made, and it's a beautiful shirt. There's only one like it. I'm not making any more. Feel free to look at it later. So let's get into the reason why I'm here. There is an agenda. Cottage Grove Sentinel and the Chronicle prove that. Let's talk about a couple notes. What I was going to speak on was totally different. It was the same topic, but I had something written out. But I'm actually going to touch on Bill's and Venice's comments. Public Building Use Code of Conduct. The purpose of the Citizens Code of Conduct is to maintain a safe and pleasant environment. There were 2 incidents that happened at the community center that night. The first one, I was there. I was a witness to it. I want to speak on the second one, the one I was involved in. I was involved in attempting to help maintain a safe, pleasant environment for the users of the building. This code of conduct sits on the wall. It cannot react. It cannot react to somebody who is coming in and violating the portion that says using a cell phone or other electronic device in a manner that is disruptive, and that was Mr. Terry Roy, the man I escorted out. This code of conduct cannot respond to that. It sits on the wall. The officer outside, the sole officer, because I pay attention to city politics and because I pay attention to Facebook, and I also knew because I went outside and heard it from Jared Butler's mouth himself, he was the only one on duty. If I'm wrong, Captain Marsh I welcome him to come in and prove me wrong. He was the only one on duty. He's outside dealing with 5 women, 2 men, multiple 911 calls, a possible injury to a shoulder, and I'm supposed to walk outside and tell Officer Butler that there's a man inside implying he has a handgun involved in a physical altercation. So what happens when I walk outside and the guns come out and the bullet holes start going through the building, damaging the building, killing people? I get interviewed, and they ask, why didn't you do something? Why didn't you get involved? Another good guy with a gun can't save the day, right? Good guy with a gun can't stop a bad guy with a gun. Just for information, Mr. Roy came in from another meeting. It was not part of the original meeting. He came in from an AA meeting next door. He went outside, saw what was going on outside, came inside, and was attempting to videotape. So let's talk about having conversation. Having conversation is key. We're not going to solve this unless we have conversation. This isn't a conversation. I'm open to conversation. Some community members, we can't have a conversation. They refuse to have a conversation. We're not going to get anywhere. Let's talk about Jan Augsbury. Jan Augsbury, she got physical in the police report. It says that she got physical. That was the officer who I'm sure has watched multiple videos in the past. He said she got physical. She didn't receive an exclusion. Venice Mason, she received an exclusion. She was physical. She violated the Public Building Code of Conduct. She received 3 days. That goes against everything. Now back the blue, right? Let's back the blue. The blue says, in the best interest of community policing, we're going to trespass all parties involved until such a time that policies and procedures can be put into place to prevent something like this during public meetings. 3 days? 3 days? So if the policies and procedures were put in place in 3 days, then why did I get 90? Why did Dick and Dale and Christina get 90 days? I'm going to be sending all the counselors some information individually. I would hope that you would respond, even though I don't live within city limits. It is an incident that happened inside the city limits. I ask you to look at the video. I had a meeting with, I'm short on time, but I was told I could appeal this through the municipal court. I reached out to Michelle at the municipal court, set up a court date for June 1st at 2 o'clock to be heard. Martin Fisher got a hold of me the day before the court date, said that Mr. Boone notified him that I could not have a court date. That's because of some changes you made to the 12.24.050 back in January of this year because of the homeless situation, and that I can only appeal to the city manager. Well, we know that's not going to, we think that's not going to be fair. So anyways, thank you for the 5 minutes. I thought it was 3. You gave me more time than I expected. I will be sending you some stuff. Please look at it and please respond. I would appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Patrick Cartwright.
Mr. Myers as well. These are recent photographs of the city's encampments for the homeless. I agree. Oh, sorry. Everybody kind of knows. Patrick Cartwright, 2145 South R Street, Cottage Grove. So back to this. These are the city's homeless encampments. I have some grave concerns over fire hazards and stuff. I completely agree that we have to do something in this situation with providing adequate spots for homeless to reside. My fear is we're going to have a fire, especially at the Jerry Mark site, where there's one entrance only. That means there's one exit. So what happens in the middle of the night while people are sleeping, if there's a fire that breaks out, how many casualties are there? Not to mention the codes for park rules and then also for private property is attached to this. We've had fires over at the North Douglas site. There's firewood out there. Mr. Myers had advised everybody that there wouldn't be any burning on sites. This was prior to even opening these. The one on 99, it's been really quiet out there, and then all of a sudden we start seeing it look like a dumpster. So I think Carry It Forward should have some conversation, either by Mr. Myers or Mr. Boone, and it's the council's job to direct them to do so. I just feel that every one of our ordinances that we're held to is not being enforced. I feel there's trash. We've noticed a bit of a rat infestation coming around our shop area, which we've never had before. I'm not saying it's coming from there. It could be coming from anywhere, but we just start looking. The last thing that I'd like to address is I truly feel that back in December, when all of this stuff with changes started happening, all started rolling, it seemed like the city manager wanted to gain more control and convince the council to do things. That's my perspective of it. I don't believe that Mr. Myers has the time to devote to trespassing people. That was a municipal court deal. Now there's people in this room on both sides. I think they need to have their day in court instead of just having it thrown at them by the city manager and the assistant city manager. I mean, if there was assault that happened, there needs to be charges filed. If there wasn't, then the people that was trespassed should have their day in court too, not going and sitting in the city manager's office. I don't know of any city manager in this state that deals with this. I'm pretty certain that Richard's a little busier than this. Anyhow, that's what I have to say. Please pay attention to this. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you. Mike Bork.
My name is Mike Bork. I live at 310 North Douglas. I've been up here several times addressing the homeless, and it seems like it's a broken record. I mean, you guys have the control. Since January, there has been nothing new that's been put out. All it's done is gotten worse. What you guys have failed to look at is the long-term crisis that you have created within the city. And homeless is going to be out there regardless. But we have to have, there's no clear expectations, there's no clear direction, there's no anything out there for them. Outside, here's a place, you can go and there you go. One of the things you forgot about is in most of these places, the gray water, the trash, and the things that you will be responsible for in the upcoming years, just like the city of Eugene at Jefferson. And that's happening here. And I know you guys don't have the money for that because it's far will outweigh what our city budget is. Also, the devaluation of the property values that with these homeless that you brought into residential areas has decreased the value of the houses in those areas. So that's going to come back on your assessments as well. And from what I see, that anybody can go out there and purchase some land and put homeless on it. From what I see right now within the city guidelines, because you're housing homeless in residential areas. So I just want you to be aware of the situations that you have brought up, and there needs to be some clear set goals. I mean, we have to have something for them. I mean, in North Douglas, half the cars there are not registered. So they're on your property. So if they come out, are you responsible when they hit somebody? I don't know. You tell me. There's no parking signs. They're not observed. Every morning they're parked in the no parking zones. I've got pictures every morning that shows that. So nothing's being enforced and nothing's happening out there. So it's been placed upon you guys, and I think it's gone on nothing's been done. And it's to the point now where we're going to have to do something. So just wanted you to be aware of it. I really suggest to you guys to think back on a lot of these things that we came up about with the homeless. I mean, we used to have warming centers. Don't have those now for our people. true residents here of Cottage Grove. The same way with the burnout, I call them burnout shelters. If somebody gets displaced by a fire, we don't have those anymore available. So I think you guys need to be very cognizant on, you can build acres and acres and have it for homeless and people will come. It's just like the Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. But if you look at Portland and what they're doing now, is they're now starting to ban homeless in certain areas. And not, they can stay there overnight and then they have to move out the next day. And I think that's what's going to start happening in a lot of areas because of the problems they're causing. I just want you guys to be familiar with that. Thank you for your time, and I hope you guys do some work on this. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Resolution and ordinances. Item A, a resolution adopting the FCS Group Utility Rate Adjustment to the adopted 5-year utility rate financial plan. Staff report by Director Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. On June 14, 2021, the City Council adopted Resolution Number 2043, approving the FCS Group's 5-year utility rate financial plan for the city. The plan was adopted during COVID, but ahead of the high inflation rates driven by materials and labor shortages. The FCS 5-year utility rate plan was built using a yearly 3% increase for materials and services. City staff regularly monitored the utility funds, comparing revenues with expenses, and noticed the revenues were falling short, covering expenses. This in turn caused less carry forward in both the 2022-23 adopted budget and the 2023-24 draft budget we were preparing. On March 10, 2022, staff reached out to FCS Group and asked if they could perform a review of the city's utility funds due to the 5% increase in labor costs and the 50% plus increases in materials. Specifically, we saw high fuel, high chemical, and super long lifetime, increased costs in materials. The FCS Group performed the review and found the revenue of the water funds were falling short of the revenue necessary to operate the funds. They found that both the wastewater and storm drainage funds will have adequate revenue to operate as planned in the 5-year utility rate financial plan as adopted. On January 29, 2023, FCS Group shared the findings of the utility funds review with staff. They found a 6% increase, they recommend a 6% increase in the water funds for 2023-24 and 24-25 to balance the water fund an additional 3% and an additional 3% increase in the wastewater fund in 24-25. This evening we have from the FCS Group, we have John Gillard Ducci and Zach Hazel. They will be here to share their analysis and a slide presentation of their process in this recommendation.
Thank you, Faye, and thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm going to trust that you can see. Do you see that PowerPoint?
Yes.
Thank you. I will. I'm John Gillarducci, and Zach is on as well, as Faye mentioned. I will quickly go through. When I figure out how to advance the slides. Sorry about that. I'm having trouble advancing the slides.
Would you like me to run the slides, John?
Yeah, why don't you give it a try, Zach?
Cool. 1 second.
Perfect. So you can go ahead to slide 2. I will just very briefly remind you when we do a rate analysis, we're looking at operating costs and capital costs, trying to balance debt service and cash funded capital with the operating budget. In this case, in both water and wastewater, it's the operating expenses that came in significantly higher in the last couple years and in the current budget year. Next slide, please. So when we do look at rates, our objectives are to make sure that we're generating enough revenue to sustain the utility systems. We don't want to make a profit. We only want to charge for the services being provided, recover the costs fairly in the rate structure, and achieve whatever other objectives there might be, such as stable revenues from year to year and month to month, maintaining minimum balances, etc. So moving right into the key assumptions, these are the numbers that really changed, and the reason for the additional increases. In that upper left-hand corner, you see salaries, benefits, operating costs, construction cost inflation. What we're projecting for fiscal year 2024, the current fiscal year, which is FY 2023, that's where we saw really unexpectedly high inflation, and that's already baked in to the actual and budget costs. So we're projecting off of those for fiscal year 24, and then we're hoping that inflation will ease after that. We've got the customer growth rate built in. I mentioned the budget, and we are still targeting the same reserve balances and fiscal policies that we have in the past to keep the utilities healthy. So first, looking at the water results, as Faye mentioned, these were zeros, what we hoped in fiscal years 24 and 25. Now, in order to correct that, for the inflation in cash operating expenses, 6% per year in the upcoming fiscal year and the one after that. This shows you the impact of those increases on the current rates in that FY 2023 column and what they will be in 2024 after the first 6% increase. It's a small consolation perhaps, but you're not at the top of the list. Again, everybody's needs are different and situations are different, so it's always with caution that we show you these comparables, but just so you know what the rates are in the region for water, this gives you a typical single-family residential bill under the current and proposed rates. And then for wastewater, that 12% is consistent with the forecast from 2021. It's the additional 3% that's new in order, again, to correct for the inflation that we've seen over the last couple of years. And this shows the impact on a sample wastewater bill for a typical single-family residence. And again, some comparable rates in the region. So stormwater, the good news is no additional adjustments are needed for the stormwater utility. And you can see that rate will stay by this proposal at the $12.47 for a single family residence. And a final comparison. Thank you. That's our prepared material.
Councilor Urban?
Thank you, Mayor. Can you go over the operating costs overran? You said the primary thing that changed was operating costs, and then the last thing you said was that it was to adjust for inflation. Was it inflation in the operating costs, or can you kind of go into more detail of what that was?
I can speak to the totals, and for wastewater, what we projected back in 2021 was about $200,000 less than what we've seen for fiscal year 2024. That's the year that we're most concerned with. We did not go through, and Zach can correct me if I'm wrong, line by line to see what the items were, because we've seen this around the region. It appears to be just the inflationary impact on cash operating expenses that have made them substantially higher. In water, a very similar difference, to two to 400,000 between the two utilities. And in each case, it was isolated to the cash operating expenses.
Any other questions? Yes. Mr.
Mayor,
Stewart.
Operating expenses are chemicals. Take for instance the chemicals. We were receiving monthly increases in chemical costs for both treatment plants. We use chemicals in the process, and both of them they were monthly. Then when the fuel started going up, we received also a fuel surcharge on top of the chemical costs. Just ordering and purchasing routine maintenance items for pipe fittings or various different things. We were receiving increases in costs there. It just trickled down from, vendors for delivery costs or increases in their labor, very similar, cost of living increases that need to increase their wages. It was all increases that we received in our day-to-day operations. When he talks about construction, our construction pieces that, costs for projects and stuff seem to be falling into the budgeted numbers that we gave. I don't know if that was because we were, in some cases, some of our estimated costs on projects are somewhat high, and we've been pleased to get bids that are under. Recently, the bids are closer to what the engineers actually estimates on those projects. So we're still, those numbers are calculated for projecting the needs for our calculating the rate. So really, I could give you every item in the budget and show you what the increases were, but they're just really everyday operating expenses for items that we have to buy and operate the plants.
So kind of follow up to that. I guess my concern is I don't know of any history of us dropping rates, and if we are, or if there's a mechanism to do that besides us. And I acknowledge we can't predict the future, and it does look like inflation is going to persist. But say, and so I'm guessing that this study is saying, hey, we're looking at the trends. We have to make sure that there's enough revenue to pay into the future years. So what happens if we trend above? Do we just hold there until the next increases catch up? Is it basically just delay the next increase if we come in under budget, if prices start to level off, if supply chain opens up more again, and so prices start dropping? What's the city's strategy as far as if this is more conservative and actually we acquire significant surplus in the fund over the next couple of years? Do we just hold on to that? Because I'd like to see it match so the taxpayers pay as little as they have to maintain.
So Councilor Urban, we do these rate studies every 5 years, and they base their studies on revenue that's coming in, expenses, and operating expenses. If our if they see that our revenue is outpacing the expenses, their recommendations can be different. And I don't know if they've ever recommended in the history of rates at least to actually do a decrease. And let John respond to that. But, I'm sure that if our rates are outpacing the expenses, that would be an option. Same with other
Yes.
capital projects. That if our capital projects get done, the funds that are collected for capital projects, if it's not needed anymore, your rates are going to be reduced.
One of the things we've tried to do is be conservative, but not assume that the same high rates of inflation will continue. So we only have one more year of, let's say, higher than normal inflation, and then we've forecasted it will be back down to more normal levels. A lot of the issue we're trying to correct for now has already happened. It was the close to double-digit inflation that we saw year over year, the last year and the year before that. So, and there was really no predicting that in my opinion. That was something, again, that we're seeing all over the region as folks have tried to manage their way through it. The city was in pretty good shape. So we're trying to be conservative, but not overly conservative. And if expenses do come in low, if bids start to come in lower, then you would absolutely be looking at a different decision, possibly to reduce increases or even, which you're right, we don't see very often, but a rate reduction. That would only be in the case that we saw costs, going down over time.
Thank you.
John, I can't help but notice how much lower Eugene is than we are, and wondering if they're seeing a rate increase on the level that we are, and if you can speak to that.
So I don't know. We don't work for the city of Eugene, and I couldn't tell you what they're looking at in the near future, other than as I mentioned, everybody's systems are so different. They have there's just a certain amount of these costs of operating utility systems which are fixed, and as a much larger city, they have a bigger customer base to spread those fixed costs around. And so I'm speculating that that's why the rates are generally lower. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't know what they're facing in the way of upcoming increases.
Councilor Merriday. Councilor Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. It's troubling to see how much inflation is affecting our rates, but I also want to emphasize what happens, why we have these rates is for current operating costs as well as projected future costs. And if we are not saving for future investments, we can have troubling circumstances, such as it's my understanding the city of Cresswell's building moratorium went into effect today. So they are limited in the number of new hookups they can add to their system. And we can't predict the future. No one could have, I mean, I don't know who could have known, okay, so many years ago we should have been charging this much, so it wouldn't be so high right now, or we wouldn't have to increase the rate so much. But the other side of this, if we don't make these incremental changes, is either it will be so spiked of an increase, it will be very detrimental and it will hurt our community, or we'll have a moratorium on what we can hook up to our existing systems. So none of those are really beneficial options.
Councilor Merriday.
Yes, I just wanted to readdress the rates in Eugene. I did some water studies, and I concur with our consultants that it is spread over a much larger customer base. We have less than 4,000 customers, and there are set costs. So unfortunately, a smaller client base means higher expenses for us all. we had another 20,000 customers, we could lower our rates considerably.
Councillor Fleck?
So large water users can also impact that. I remember when Cresswell had Furcrest shut down. It seems to me their bill nearly doubled at that time because they lost their biggest user. So there's, also, large users in Eugene. And I will say one opportunity for our water bill to go down would be if, debt service, we paid off a loan. The downside of that is usually that next improvement is due at the same time we pay off that debt service. So that was one of the reasons I really wanted to make sure that the debt service was broken out separately in our bill. So at least the customers, and in this case it is customers because we have folks in and out of city limits. Most are in, but there are a few out. So that they can see what it is they're paying for and why. Like I said, this is a tough pill to swallow for all of us. Our business commercial rate, we pay over $350 a month, and we're looking at 12% increase in wastewater, and now this in water. So, yeah, it's painful for all. I agree, but as Councilor Dreer said, the alternative is doing nothing and ending up with DEQ coming and setting a moratorium on development, which is also something we don't want. So, while it's a tough pill to swallow, I certainly support that this is really the only avenue that we can take.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you. Resolution number?
2099. 2099? Madam Mayor, I move that the council adopt resolution 2099. Did I get that right? Thank you.
Yeah. Second. We have a motion with a second. Any discussion? No. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Councilor Dreer?
Aye.
Councilor Urban?
Aye.
Youth Representative?
Aye.
Councilor Fleck? Aye. Councilor Merriday?
Aye.
Councilor Savage?
Aye.
Councilor Stitt?
Aye.
Mayor Silky?
Aye. Okay. Resolution carries. Item B, an ordinance amending Chapter 3.10 Multiple Unit Property Tax Exemption Program of Cottage Grove Municipal Code. Staff report by Mr. Mongan.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor and Council. In December 2019, the Cottage Grove City Council adopted ordinance number 3117, which established Chapter 3.10 Multi-Unit Property Tax Exemption Program, also referred to as the MUPTI. The MUPTI program was adopted following the adoption of the 2018 Housing Needs Analysis, the H&A. H&A showed that the city needs to take steps to increase our housing inventory by 1,300 dwellings over the next 20 years. At Council's discretion, staff prepared a suite of development code amendments and drafted the MUPTI program, which was later adopted. These measures have led to the approval of 268 new multifamily dwellings within the city of Cottage Grove and others that have been created but not benefiting from the MUPTI program. However, to date, none of the approved developments have included a regulated affordable housing piece. To address this need, staff successfully applied for a technical assistance grant from the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development, the LCD, to complete an affordable housing implementation plan. In the time since the affordable housing implementation plan was completed, staff has returned to council on 2 occasions to brief council and to receive direction. At this time, staff is prepared to present the draft ordinance amending Chapter 3.10 of the Cottage Grove Municipal Code to reflect the direction provided by council. The amendments included in the draft ordinance include changes to the minimum requirements to meet eligibility, which are shown in section 3.10.020, a revised list of public benefits shown in section 3.10.050, to include the addition of a separate standards and guidelines document that will be adopted by council resolution. The proposed amendment to the eligibility requirements in section 3.10020 now includes an incentive to develop 25% of the total proposed housing as regulated affordable housing for those at 60% AMI, that's area median income. The incentive is that the developer will only be required to provide one public benefit if the regulated affordable housing component is chosen. If a developer does not wish to provide affordable housing, they must provide a minimum of 3 public benefits to meet the eligibility requirements. Staff believes that the proposed amendments will allow the city to remain competitive in regard to new development while ensuring that the importance of housing affordability is included in new developments benefiting from the MUPD program. As recommended by staff, that following any discussion, the council will hold the first vote on the attached ordinance amending Chapter 3.10 Multi-Unit Property Tax Exemption Program of the Cottage Grove Municipal Code. This ordinance has been available for more than 1 week, therefore it could be adopted in one meeting. Was contacted by Councilors Irvin and Mary Day regarding some questions after the agenda session on Friday. I apologize I wasn't able to get everything in print. It was a little short notice on some of these requests, but I'll just make an attempt to explain what the asks were and what the answers were, and if that leads any further discussion. Brought some other things to support that. Councilor Mary Day requested just some examples of the other cities' ordinances that were used to, I like to call it salad bar, take what you want, leave the rest, as far as different ideas to improve our current program. I believe he spoke with Director Stewart regarding Salem and Newport and some of the other things that were used in the original MUPD program draft that was adopted by council. For this effort, I looked again at Newport, Corvallis, Florence, some other cities. Over the past couple months, I've been working in support, friendly support with the cities of Springfield and Bend on their MUPD programs that they're working on putting together, and kind of teasing out some ideas from those conversations as well. Additionally, Councilor Mary Day requested valuations on the amounts abated for some of the larger projects. So that would be Harrison Village Apartments, 540 Gateway, and then the Pine Springs. So Pine Springs, of course, hasn't been developed yet. It's we're still waiting for building permits, so we won't have any numbers on that for some time. The 540 Gateway project, which is at full build out, will be at 40 units, but it's only at 20 right now with occupancy. I would imagine that probably we won't see any kind of calculation on that one until next tax year, just based on when they got occupancy on those, which was after January 1, which is the effective period of taxation. For Harrison Village, they were complete as of January 1st of this year. However, tax rolls are not certified until July 1st. So while I did make an attempt to have Joe Lee and or Jen Haynes at Assessment and Taxation give me a little idea on what that might look like, unfortunately, they just didn't feel comfortable releasing that information at this time. I did do some other research, though, just to kind of get an idea. There's really no like-for-like comparisons due to the fact that we haven't had development, hence the MUPD program. But that said, looked at the Riverwalk cottages, if you will, that we call it a detached family or detached multifamily style. They did, that was constructed prior to MUPD being in place and does not benefit from the program. The full, well, I can't recall the assessed value, but I would just say that their tax bill, their annual tax bill for this year was $48,000. But that includes fire district, school district, county, and then the city. So it's not an insignificant sum of money, but the city's portion is, of course, just a portion of that. I believe that's all the items that Councilor Mary Day had requested. Councilor Irvin was interested in finding out some more info based on about the 2018 housing needs analysis and just some of the methodology for how they arrived at needing, 1,300 new dwellings, but then as far as the housing, that mix, right, of housing types. So in a memo that I presented to council as an informational item associated with scheduling work sessions for this current year, one of the exhibits showed that we needed 280 units for the folks at 30% AMI, 354 units for 30 to 60 AMI, 178 for 60 to 80, 299 for 80 to 120, and then 263 for 120 or more of AMI. So it is kind of a split across the board. And Councilor Irvin's question, I thought it was a good one. I don't know that I found the answer, but I'm going to offer something. The number of to get to the 1,300 new dwellings needed in a 20-year period, they use a growth factor of 1.3% growth to model our current population projecting into the future, taking into account things of age, income, that income data derived from the American Community Survey data, which is a 3 to 5 year survey like the census, but more intensive in the sense that it can highlight in a shorter, on more frequent intervals than the decennial 10-year census. So pairing that with our existing housing stock, as I read through the methodologies and just tried to understand, they didn't explicitly point to it, but I think what they did is they looked at the availability of lands, those lands that are still developable and unconstrained where they were, paired it up with that growth rate, and then looked at things like what is the existing mix. So that existing mix, for example, and this is related but not necessarily associated, but they looked at things like, okay, what's the current stock citywide for developed lands? Single family residential was at, I want to say 26% of our housing stock, existing housing mix, 3% on high density residential. So, I mean, just a significant disparity in those numbers. And so I think it was just a matter of looking at all that and then looking at just at income trends and rental expense trends that got them to proposing or suggesting that we needed that kind of a mix of affordability levels as part of that 1,300 over 20 years.
Mr. Myers, do we have someone online?
Yes, Bruce is here.
Okay.
So Bruce could unmute himself.
Mr. Kelch?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can.
Excellent. So I want to commend the council and also city staff, Eric Mungan, for moving ahead and giving you some guidelines on how to develop a MUPTI. But I also wanted to express some concerns about the preposition or, as looking at that section that gives you the choice as a developer to include 25% of the total dwelling units as regulated affordable housing, 60% AMI, or include, your other option is to include 3 or more elements benefiting the public. If you choose to implement as worded, it'd be very interesting to continue to track that to see how much affordable housing is really developed with that clause. I know that in the past when we did Cottage Village Coalition's presentation early on, the city didn't have a LRPT, a low-income rental housing property tax exemption, and there was discussion about how in the future that should be developed to encourage nonprofits and other organizations like Square One Villages to continue to build affordable, quality, low-income housing. So I would encourage the council to continue to look at that. This, as you pass the MUPTI, please don't forget the LRPT and what it contains. I know Mayor Sosby has talked about being supportive of having an LRPT as part of your encouragement of housing. The housing needs assessment, as we all know, says housing is needed at all income levels, at all levels of rents. And so we do need to continue to address the affordable low-income rentals. And you can do that through a LRPT. Eugene has a pretty good example of that. They have a version of it that's a 20-year LRPT for nonprofits. And I would encourage the council to continue and the staff to look at that, continue to develop that, and possibly combine the two, or have 2 separate avenues by which affordable housing can be developed. So thank you for that, and thanks for moving in that direction to provide more housing in Cottage Grove.
Thank you. Any discussion? Questions?
Thank you, Mayor Soulsby. I'm in support of how this is written because it does give you the option. From my understanding, the word "or" says you could pay nothing now and create lower income pockets, or you can pay lots more and not have those lower income pockets. I'm also under the impression that we are working on a LRPD. It is behind the scenes, but because we already have a MUPD, this is easier to manipulate right now. But the LRPD is coming, so I'm excited to see that, and I also support that. We need income, or we need income too. We need housing for all incomes, and I'm curious, as we're throwing out these AMI numbers, what is our AMI, and what is 60%? Just curious.
Mayor, Councilor Savage. So I'll be honest, I have not run the numbers for the city of Cottage Grove. Needed to actually kind of work through some of the HUD information on that to establish that. But I did bring, at least I hope I brought, I showed it to Councilor Mary Day earlier today.
Yeah, I think that for a family of three, it was $24,000 is 60% of the average median income.
Right.
$24,000.
And so with that, then there's a cap placed on the amount for a 2-bedroom rental at $777.
I'm sorry to interrupt. The youth representative needs to leave.
Yes, please. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And Mr. Mongan, we have a copy of the AMI right up here.
Oh, right, that's the one that you provided to us, yeah. Somehow I didn't get that. Does that include what the rental cap rates would be then too, or just the income rates?
It would just show the percentage of AMI for the county.
Do we have that, or is that the only sheet?
I had included that the last time this came forward. Councilor Dreer happened to have a copy with her.
Oh.
So, for example, though, with that project that I'm aware of the values on, the 540 Gateway project, 2-bedroom apartments inside washer and dryer, each unit has washer and dryer fully, dishwasher, granite countertops, so pretty high end, solid wood cabinetry, things like that. They're charging $1,500, $1,550, I believe, for those units. So under something like this, if it were similar to Newport's AMI at 60%, it would be, about half, regulated at about half to get there, which, start thinking about that, as Councilor Savage said, there's having to do multiple public benefits under the new guidelines that council will adopt. It's not going to be as easy as just saying, I have extra open space. Staff intends to present that if you're going to do extra open space, we don't want it to be wasted space, right? Because if you have open space, well, can you put more housing there? That's the best use of the land. So if they want to do extra open space, staff will present for council consideration as part of the guidelines resolution. Okay, if you're going to do extra open space, we want a basketball court. We want playground facilities. We want something out of it, not just what the code says right now, which is just actively used area, which could be a picnic table. That's it, So elevating that minimum standard. On paper, the public benefits in the code section 3.10050 they do read simply, facilities for those with disabilities. Okay, but what does that mean? Because at a certain number, say Pine Springs, building code after 100 units requires 2% to be ADA accessible. So are they really doing anything that they're not already having to do? So there's just some things like that that I think will make those public benefits seem more worthy of considering that cost-benefit analysis of doing regulated affordable versus investing more just in the site in general.
Can I ask one more question as a follow-up? I know we're not talking about the LRT tonight, but what do you think the ETA is for talking about it? When are we going to see that?
I think I told Councilor Mary Day the fall. That's kind of my goal right now. I do need to get in front of the 3 other taxing boards. I don't see a whole lot of reason for that we wouldn't get support from those taxing districts, in as much as there's only, LRT is nonprofit organizations, religious institutions, right? It's still a lot. In Eugene, I think the biggest occupier of the LRT program, if you will, is Square One Villages. But they really only have taken advantage of that in recent history. And it's not all over. It's not really going to eat up a bunch of lands necessarily. Because homes for good comes and built, they're already going to be tax exempt. It doesn't move the needle at all. So it really is going to come down to, organizations such as Cottage Village Coalition with the support of Square One, or, some as yet unnamed nonprofit, and then, of course, a religious institution. So it's definitely a great tool. It will definitely benefit places that already exist, such as Cottage Village Coalition on Madison, potentially, depending on how the ordinance is written, as council directs, might benefit some of our existing HUD-supported properties that are reaching their 25-year end contract without a renewal, not being able to renew. That might benefit them. But as I briefed before, in the example of a HUD project that comes off of the HUD funding, that would then take all of that off the revenue, off of city revenue as well, right? Because they are paying property taxes right now. And then they wouldn't if they got the LRT. So it does kind of cut both ways. Just long haul.
Anything else? Anyone?
I think Councilor Urban had his hand.
Thank you, Mayor. So our LRT was about as restrictive, free of restrictions as you could make one. And we've had a lot of development under it, or I would say pretty successful turnout of development. And you have these comparable MUPD programs. In Eugene, far more restrictive. Mm-hmm. You said there's one in Florence, Newport. And how do those rank in terms of restrictions, and what projects do they have this affordability thing in them?
Yes. So City of Newport, I have it here. What they require it's a little different slice, and it's certainly something that should be considered, but they do require an affordability component, which is 20% of the units of a project must be regulated affordable at 80% of AMI. If they go with 60% AMI, it only needs to be 10%. So they offer 2 options there as far as regulated affordable. More if you're charging more, less if you're charging less. And so that is a component. Newport's it's hard to compare though, to be honest with you. I mean, a lot of seasonal employment there, just with the fisheries and things like that. And of course, the tourist destinations. Of course, they regulate against short-term rental housing, like we do with our MUPD. You can't do a MUPD to make them all Airbnbs, which makes sense. So there's that component of it. I looked through some of their more recent approvals, and they're looking at projects that have 500 units as part of it. So the one that I looked at, they chose the 20% at 80% AMI. That was 110 of the whole project had to be at that regulated affordable, for 10 years. We're a ways from that, I think. I mean, we're blessed to get the 24 units per acre density that we got out of Harrison Village. I just am not aware right now of something that's going to happen like that.
Well, that's part of the thought process. If you have large amounts of land, you can spread your costs on a construction project and potentially take less per unit and still make it work out. I mean, what's the biggest available land we have right now that would support it seems like it's getting used up right now. Pine, was it Pine?
The Pine Springs
The Pine
development.
Springs. So when you look at causing further restriction, because this is a proposal to restrict, if they choose not to do affordable pieces, larger capital outlays, and that's harder and harder to spread the cost out. I guess I'd be interested in, do we have contact with developers that are giving feedback on, like, yeah, we would pass on that right now, or here are the conditions under which we could go, build under that.
So I reached out to a couple trying to get some feedback on this, and unfortunately just didn't hear back in time. But anecdotally from previous conversations, I would just say, Pine Springs comes to mind. I think, well, of course, council approved their MUPD at the last meeting. But, it was $3.5 million just to purchase the property, $250,000 to clean it up to the state that it's in right now, and then $17 million to build out. It's quite a significant project to get there. Could they have done it more dense? Absolutely. Could they have done other things with the space? Maybe. It's hard to say. But it's quite expensive to get there. I did solicit that applicant, the property owners. Hey, it'd be really awesome if you could include something like that, because you could at least have the economy of scale of 120 units to spread that cost out. Whereas, if you had a fourplex and you said a quarter of them had to be affordable, so one unit or whatever, it's a lot harder to spread that money around, as you're pointing out. If you can spread the cost out, that's that. I think choices made by Harrison Village and 540 Gateway, as I said, 540 Gateway, they tried to make them a little higher end. So where they didn't pay out for amenity around the site, common features, they paid out with solid wood cabinetry and granite countertops and high-end stuff like that to get to their price point. Harrison Village included a clubhouse and swimming pool. I think that's one of the amenities that Ms. Albrecht, that's what she wants to have in her portfolio. Of course, they also have covered parking, which is another thing. But that project, is getting up to that number where they can start spreading that expense, that debt across, to make it pencil for them. You started the question, Councilor, with, what lands are there? There's really not a lot right now. We have a lot of lands that are either private ownership, with no interest in moving for whatever reason, moving being developing or selling. There's constrained land, such as behind the Housing Authority building here. There's that open field, but it's also floodplain. It's zoned multifamily residential, R2, supposed to have 8 units per acre, but then we have a floodplain code that says not so much, and certainly a project like that on those kinds of lands isn't going to get HUD dollars because of the environmental concerns of being in a special flood hazard area. So there's not a lot of options, and this is a historical problem, if you will. It's been around since 1981 when the comp plan was adopted. Of course, there was a mindset back then of how to do it. I'm sure if you read the comp plan now, you would see it's very inclined towards single-family residential and space, large lots, things like that, which is why we end up with things like a significant portion of our developed plans being single-family residential than 3% at high density. It was, where can we put them? I hate to say them, but it's on the outskirts of town, out past Bohemia Elementary on Cottage Grove, Lorraine, or West Main. There's 10 acres of R3 designated land, but it's as far about city limits, basically. It's like putting it as far away as possible. There's no services out there, no commercial nodes or anything like that. It's absolutely, impractical from a land use perspective, but it's the historic remnant of where Cottage Grove was at that time. Probably just not interested in growing that way, but had to check a box.
Councilor Dreher.
Mayor, thank you. I want to commend you, Mr. Mongan, for putting this together so quickly, since we did keep pushing you, I think, at every meeting. Like, so when are we going to see this again? Thank you. And I want to remind those in the audience or watching, this revision changes what was a standard MUPD, first go around standard, kind of flexible, I think, as you, Councilor Irvin, mentioned, from requiring one public benefit, one element for public benefit, to get the tax abatement, to not basically pay your fair share of taxes for this project. And this revision will include 3 or more public benefits, or you could have a regulated affordable housing component. I very much support this. I think the multi-unit property tax exemption is one of the few tools that we as a local government has to incentivize development, while also looking at the needs of our constituents. Most of the constituents who will never know we ever did this, or never know that unit that is now affordable to them, that they got in, that's like platinum standard, so excited to have an affordable unit, they will never know it's because we made this decision right here, and things went into place with that development. So I'm very much in support of using the tools that we have for the people that we serve, who will never know we made this choice. But it's really important when you look at, I think back to what Mr. Mongan put together as far as the FEMA floodplain maps, and how that's going to increase people's insurance rates, and look at the demographics of our community, who is low income. The proportions of people who are low income are much higher here than the rest of the state and the rest of the county. So we really need to put in place these regulations that would incentivize it as a salad bar. You could go over here and maybe affordable housing is pickles. Maybe you want something else on your salad. I think it's good for us to have these options open, and I'm very much in support of that. Again, because that's the point of this body, is what can we do to make a difference for people.
Councilor Mary Day.
I also want to commend the staff and our city planner for putting this work together. I do want to speak to a concern I do have about the option of including 25% of the units to be at 60% AMI. I don't believe that that will work in the fashion that we are hoping it might. If I were a developer and I said, oh, well, I would have to commit 25% of my units to a much lower rate, and then compare that to doing 3 things that if I cherry pick from the list, I can get off fairly light, such as a tenant amenity, which I don't really even view as a public benefit to the public at large, or a meeting room, or an architectural feature. I could say to myself, in the short term, it would cost me something, but in the long term, I wouldn't have to have any affordable units. And I think I hate to sound this way, but I think 25% is too large a number to include. Or I like the idea of the other Newport plan where you have the option of having 80% AMI. But I think that we're not going to get any affordable housing out of this language, is my fear. Everything we built thus far is market rate. We're catering to the top 40% of our population. I think it's poor optics that one of our MUPTI projects is advertising currently as luxury apartments. That's just not like I don't see the public benefit. I know we're trying to get units, but I'm concerned we're not going to get anything for people that are in need. So I would be open for reworking the language to have a less, an affordable option, provide affordable housing at a lower percentage rate, or having other like a varied tier where they can they can select from affordable options that provide certain at 80% and 60. But if we make it too high with the affordable component, then no developer is going to choose that, I fear. That's my fear, that we're building for the top tier of our population, and the LRPT is while it might the document or the instrument might arrive soon, it's a slow process that requires years of grant seeking and fundraising, and it won't provide any relief, I'm thinking, within 5 years before a project could be completed. So thank you.
Councillor Fleck? Councillor Stennett?
Yeah, I would share you, Councilor Meredith's concern. Thank you. I'm sorry. That this may not have make much of a dent in our need for affordable housing. I don't know. I mean, and this is maybe just a hypothetical, but how many developers are ready to build something different in the course of building a development to include affordable housing as part of that development? Is that a very common thing at all? I don't. It seems to me that the market rate is the market rate because that's what the market is bearing. I don't know that we get much affordable housing without affordable materials and affordable contractors, and I don't know how we do that without some kind of subsidy, some kind of help from an agency that would do something like a LRPT. I don't know that we can convince that many developers who have to get paid and who have to pay their people to build something less than market rate. I don't know how we do that. It's disturbing because it strikes the heart of who we are as a community. I mean, we're a working class town, and yeah, we're creating market rate that caters to the top 40%, but we're also renting at a very high rate. We are, I mean, I don't know how people haven't already been forced out of this community. Of course, they probably are. Without some kind of help from an agency that helps to bring those costs down, I don't know how we can do this. I don't know that I oppose the MUFTI as it's written here for that reason. I do think it is wise and beneficial to increase the requirement of public benefits, but I just don't know how affordable housing can be how this can make an appreciable dent in our affordable housing. I think I'll be excited to see the LRPT when it comes out and to talk about other ways that we can do this to keep the people that have the blood and sweat equity in this town and the history and the care and the pride and the family and everything that we love about this community here.
Councillor Fleck.
Thank you. Yeah, I certainly want to see more affordable housing developed in our town. Absolutely. My fear, however, is without an in-depth study from speaking with multiple developers, look at the, mortgage rates right now and look at, wood's come down a bit, but it's still, expensive. And I guess my fear is that if we pass something too restrictive, we'll absolutely have zero development. And so I think this is a good first step, but I would encourage us to, have those conversations in the future with developers to see, what will the market bear. I think there's also better opportunities. Our city manager was talking about working with Homes for Good and developing, some capital A HUD, Section 8 developments. I think that this is long term, so the Section 8, you said it was 25 years typically?
I believe that's the typical
as
contract.
opposed to 10 years. And so I just think that there are also other options out there for us. So I would just hate to have us put a requirement in without really knowing if that's just going to absolutely kill development or not. But I can't agree with you more. I can't tell you the clients that come to community sharing that cannot afford their rent. And so it is a problem. For sure. But as we develop more units, the theory would be that, supply and demand, that hopefully, some of the ones that aren't as new or have as many bells and whistles will, become more in the affordable range for folks. Like I said, that's in theory. The problem is our supply is so low. I don't know that we're going to see that, soon. But that's kind of where we're at. So I certainly support this. I want to thank staff. I think they really put a lot of thought into this, and I think that adding the three pieces, three requirements other than doing affordable and holding some feet to the fire as far as what those mean, as far as some actual public benefit. I really want to commend them. I think they've done a great job.
I mean. Thank you, Mayor. Not to negotiate against myself here or anything, but I did stumble upon another mechanism that I'd like to put out there because I want to have this ordinance be the best that it can be for the community. It's been touched on here. The cost of development is certainly very high. It's the same as it is in Eugene, but the rents are only on aggregate $100 more in Eugene than here, but it costs the same amount to build. That's pretty tough, to get to. And it doesn't cover the gas to live here versus there. So that's problematic. The city of Corvallis, in their MUPD program, I had to reread this after Councilor Merriday and I chatted earlier today. They have a two-prong approach, or if you will. And if you don't want to do an regulated affordable piece, they require that the developer, through the course of that 10-year abatement period, pay into an affordable housing trust 10% of the abated value each year. So something like that, a program like that would say on Harrison Village or something like that. And like I said, I don't know the numbers yet on what's going to be abated, but let's say it's $100,000. So they're going to kick in $100,000 or $10,000 the first year. And then as the 3% hit, it goes up incrementally with that. Well, at the end of the 10 years, maybe you have $125,000 that then can be used to go towards purchasing lands, paying the SDCs for affordable housing developments, paying building permits. Council did adopt a resolution and create two different funds to support nonprofits doing regulated affordable housing, paying the SDCs and building permits. This would be a way to fund that more regularly and perhaps with less pain to the developer. But it's certainly something that we could consider, not necessarily with this ordinance, or I can take it back and come back at a later date, however that works. But it certainly is another mechanism that still, it would move the needle for making things developable under a LRPD or something like that, because we'd be able to buy down some of those costs in-house while still not giving away from those SDC funds, which we can't do, right? We can't waive them. We have to pay them from somewhere, things like that. So it's something that's out there that exists in practice. Corvallis is using it. It's, just more tools in the toolbox. I'll do whatever you all tell me to do, but I just want to put that out there because as I was thinking about it today, it really does come down to the dollar. Things are more affordable if we can get the cost down on the front end.
Great. Any others?
If I might, I'd just like to share some income data that was used when I filled out the enterprise zone. I was able to get it while you guys were discussing, but the median household income for Cottage Grove, the census came up with through, it was $52,994. Cresswell's is $78,974. Quite a difference, just 8 miles up the road. And then the average for Lane County is $58,636, and the statewide median income, household income, is $70,884. So you can see we're on the lower side of the spectrum on it. And if you look at the per capita income per person in Cottage Grove, it's $23,958, and once again, Crestwell's $33,560. So if you do 60% of the median household income, it would be just $31,796. According to the last census data.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I kind of feel like maybe they should bring it back with some revisions. There was a thing I was going to plug for the streets because when we were first talking about this, I thought, well, talk about a public benefit, have money directed to a fund, maybe at that 10% that actually also funds the streets as an option of a public benefit, or the only option. We drive it there, but in general, I would say that just for the sake of making a collective decision, I don't support really any other restrictions on the MUPTI. I think should explore the LRPT as the avenue for affordability, in addition to these other mechanisms you're talking about in discussions. I think we need to keep the door wide open for development. There's gonna be as unrestricted as possible, which I do believe will drive the market, and I think we are seeing a change in the market. So yeah, if we can rework, maybe we can have more consensus.
Councillor Tur.
Mayor, I appreciate that perspective. I think one thing it seemed like we agreed on in past discussions was at least increasing the number of required public improvements from 1 to 3. So I would move that we pass this, I think it's a resolution, ordinance, sorry, and this ordinance without any affordable housing component, but increasing the public benefit requirement to 3, because from my past discussions, it seemed like just one public benefit, that was maybe a covered bus stop, and then you get 10 years tax abatement. That's like giving it away.
Sounds like we might be negotiating. If we were going to do a public benefit, I guess I would say let's not give the option. I agree that it was, some of those were, I guess the word pathetic comes to mind as far as like what you'd actually get from it. So if you really want to ensure a public benefit that's going to benefit everybody, maybe you make one public benefit, but it be the streets, street funding.
Mayor, thank you, Councilor Irvin. So we'd want to definitely check with legal counsel because there's some pretty robust Supreme Court findings. Dolan comes to mind for offsite improvement requirements. I'm not sure how taking cash in lieu of getting a benefit would fit into that model. Certainly it's not contingent on a land use question, but we would just want to make sure that would be, something that could be done. I just want to put that out there. That's an important thing that we should look at. Also, per statute, when it says public benefit, I agree it's a little misleading. These design elements, if you will, as it's drilled down to in the eligibility and then the public benefits section, do not have to be public benefits for the community at large, right? And that's out of statute. So I mentioned Harrison Village providing the amenity of the pool and clubhouse space. That's a bonus for those tenants. That's a public benefit. I'm not aware of any that council has approved that only provided one public benefit. Everybody's always had at least 2, some more than that. Pine Springs had 9 on theirs. So while some of them involve more cash than others or none at all, but whatever, there's always that mix in there. But nobody's gotten through with, 1 extra square foot of open space or anything like that. I just put that out there. That certainly wouldn't meet very many expectations, but the guidelines resolution document will absolutely clear that up, right? So staff has that tool to be like, sorry, developer, here's the guidelines that I received from council. We can both look at them together. And it says, if you're going to do additional open space, it's got to be, you have to be at 150% of minimum density. And then that extra open space needs to be 125% of the minimum plus a capital facility. So like a, basketball court or something that can be It's not just a picnic table in the grass.
Councillor Flack.
Thank you. Boy, I'm hearing this all over the board here, and I'm thinking about poor staff trying to discern what it is we're asking them to do. And so I actually really like this proposal, but I'm certainly happy to send it back. I just want to make sure we're clear on the direction, because I'm hearing one, from Councilor Urban saying, gosh, let's not do anything, to Councilor Merryday, who wants to add, more affordable piece. And I actually respect both positions, but I'm worried about giving staff direction on how to go forward. So like I said, my position is I like this, but I'm certainly willing to be flexible on that.
Councilor Merryday.
I just want to clarify. I want to have an option for affordability that might actually be used. And I don't want to add more restrictions or more affordability. I want something so that when a developer sees, oh, I could do this, I would like to do that because I could feel good about it. And it's still not going to kill me on my plan. I think 25% would do that if I was the developer. So I want to just clarify, I'm not asking for more. I'm asking for a real chance that some affordability would be built into a unit when we are giving away a considerable amount of funds.
Mayor, Councilor Merriday. So I would say it's not necessarily giving away funds because they're not realized. If they don't get the benefit of the MUPTI, they don't build. So in 10 years, you could have nothing. Or you could have the value of one single family dwelling instead of a fourplex. So it's not, missed revenues. It's, as I mentioned earlier, MUPTI is really kind of like the best retirement plan ever. You don't really have to do anything, but in 11 years, you know what you're getting, which is significant. Something you plan for. So just something to kind of keep guardrails on that. As far as, as we discussed earlier, a tiered approach to, if it's an infill and you only have 3 to 9 units, maybe you don't have to do affordability because how do you spread that across such a small market share? I think then people would be like, well, I'm never going to build 10. They'll only go to 9. If they meet the density, they're just going to stop at whatever that trigger point is, which I think cuts the wrong way. So it would be difficult. Another thing, too, that we would have to implement would be a pro forma analysis. If we're going to really kind of dissect everyone and require some portion to be there. Because then we really have to make that, if not for this, there's no that arguments. So looking at, doing the analysis, whether it can be done in-house or needs to be shipped out to an accounting firm with more experience in this regard, I would tell you, our MUPTI application is $840. Newport's is $5,000. Florence, $4,300. So they both have pro forma requirements. I assume that some portion of it is part of that analysis to verify. But then they've got to work with the taxing, with assessment and taxation, because it's an outlay over each year of the 10 years to prove this is why I need this. And so it's a lot. It becomes another barrier. Absolutely, I hear you. We need to incentivize. I think this is a good swing in that direction, given the direction that you all have given me over the past couple of months. Actually, since the beginning of MUPTI, we've been talking about subtle tweaks. Can always come back and revisit with new ideas. Like I said, I feel bad kind of throwing in that 10% thing if you don't want to do it, but it's it's another mechanism for raising revenue to support these programs. Council was not interested in a construction excise tax that would benefit affordable housing programs because we already have a construction excise tax for the school district, which is significant, I would point out. $1.25 a square foot. I didn't do the math on Harrison Village, but I'm pretty sure she paid $100,000 just to the school district, which is a lot. That's a barrier. She was pretty blunt about it, that was significant to her bottom line. And I don't think there's anything we can do about that. for the school district. But we can come up with other measures.
Counselor Stinnett?
I'm gladly be corrected if I'm wrong, but it seems like the compromise between whatever it would take to put some real teeth into the affordability portion of this and don't do anything to restrict development is kind of what we're looking at. Seems to me. I can support this as it's put forth for that reason. I think it's the middle ground of a variety of opinions that are sitting up here.
Mr. Fleck?
Can I make a recommendation? If we can't build consensus around this, that we maybe get a subcommittee together with staff and developers and have that subcommittee really look into this in depth of what would it take to get where we want to go and still have development happen. Because I think for me, the problem right here, and I heard a little bit of this from Councilor Urban, I don't have any empirical evidence to tell me, yep, this is going to work and this isn't. And I don't think we're going to get there because I think the different size developments, from what I'm hearing, are going to have different components. But I think getting a feel from a subcommittee, if like I said, I could support this tonight, or I think I would be willing to serve on that as well if we wanted to do that. And so I offer that as an opportunity. And if somebody wants to support this, they certainly can make a motion, in that effect.
Counselor Savage?
Thank you, Mayor. What if we pass this tonight and have a subcommittee? Because the conversation's still not done. Clearly, there is no consensus. But if we continue the conversation with a recommendation to come back to, in 3 months, we could even revise this. But this would at least get the 3 amenities, public benefits up and running now. And we're getting a subcommittee going.
Councilor Merryday?
If there was one change made, I would support it, and that was to lower the required affordability from 25 to 10%. I would accept it as written.
I don't think we're there.
So, subcommittee?
I would love to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I would as well.
Mm-hmm.
Mayor, I'd like to see us vote on this as written and the subcommittee, because I'm not trying to be hasty, but any additional MUFTI application that's going to come to us is going to be under what's written. So I would want it to be under this version, at least while we tweak it. So I move that we pass this ordinance. Ordinance number
3173.
3173 as written.
We have a motion with a second.
Friendly clarification, this would be passing with a subcommittee meeting to make a recommendation. Is that what you're saying?
We can do that by consensus.
Yeah. Okay. So, second.
Will the recorder please call the roll?
Councilor Urban?
Nay.
Councilor Fleck?
Aye.
Councilor Merryday?
Nay.
Councilor Savage?
Aye.
Councilor Stinnett?
Aye.
Councilor Drew?
Aye.
Mayor Sol?
Nay. Oh, motion passes.
Thank you.
All right. Item 8, business from the City Council.
I just want to make a clarification. Because it wasn't unanimous, it does need a second vote. So it didn't pass, but it goes in there.
Thank you. City Council initiation of Main Street legalization proceedings to determine street width for the Main Street revitalization project. Staff report by Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor. So the Economic Development Administration, commonly referred to as EDA, approved the Main Street revitalization project on August 22nd, 2022. EDA funding conditions require the city engineer of record, the city legal counsel, and the city manager to complete an evidence of good title supporting city ownership of the 65-foot wide Main Street right-of-way. City staff, branch engineering, Cascade Title have researched records generally relied upon to complete these forms as far back as the late 1800s. Recorded maps, pictures, and 3 individual property legal descriptions identify the 65-foot wide right-of-way along the full length of Main Street. However, a recorded document establishing the 65-foot wide width of Main Street right-of-way has yet to be located. Given the project timeline constraints, legal counsel has recommended that city rely upon Oregon Revised Statute 223.935 as the basis for EDA's required evidence of good title. These statutes authorize the city council to initiate a process to confirm the establishment of a public road within city limits. Once initiated by motion, the city council, the process would include a survey of the road area, which has been completed by branch already for their design, a city engineer written report, including the survey and other council directed information, notice to all abutting property owners, a council public hearing, and then a city council order abandoning or completing the road legalization process, and then final monumenting the roadway by recording a final survey. Main Street's road area has already been surveyed and monumented. Therefore, staff does not anticipate any difficulty in complying with required statutory steps outlined above. Staff's recommendation by motion, the City Council initiate the public road legalization process for the width of Main Street within the EDA approved Main Street revitalization project per ORS 223.935, subsections 1 and 3, and direct staff to undertake all applicable statutory procedures. In your packet, just to show you, there's a map that shows the 65-foot wide width. We have maps go back to 1903, I believe, shows that. We have pictures which document concrete sidewalks clear, 1916, 1906, 1917. It shows that it was a public right-of-way and it was part of Main Street. We're back there. Do not know why we cannot locate the recorded actual width of the road in record. It could be something that back in 1906 didn't really feel like it was that important. But, unfortunately, for EDA to complete the process, we have to have that documentation that shows that we have ownership, and that it's going to be in that ownership for 20 years, and that the general public is going to benefit from this investment.
Councillor Flack.
Madam Mayor, I move that the City Council initiate the public road legalization process for the width of Main Street within the EDA-approved Main Street Revitalization Project pursuant to ORS 223.9351 and 3, and direct staff to undertake all applicable statutory procedures.
Second.
We have a motion with a second. Oh, discussion?
I'm in support. I just wondered if, can we foresee this having other uses later on? I mean, we're legalizing our, the width of our ownership of the street, essentially. Is it something that we need to do for other reasons? I'm just curious. Does that make sense?
If I, Mayor, I understand the question is.
We've never established the width of Main Street, it sounds like, in documentation.
Yeah, in the legal sense of a recorded 65-foot width, we cannot locate it. It's been established, and I hope the pictures in the map show you that
right.
We've gone with 65 feet width since we're back into the early, if not late 1800s, early 1900s or late 1800s. As the width, I mean, if you go down Main Street, the buildings are amazingly all on one plane, it's not like they dive in and out 5 or 10 feet or anything. It's one straight line down there. I I do not know why this step was missed or not included, but another process would have been to essentially go and show prescriptive rights that the public's been using this for more than 10 years and go before a judge and get a ruling. This is a much easier process. It's something that you can handle under statute, and that's why it's being recommended.
Mr. Myers.
And yeah, someday in the future, it may be important again on Main Street, but more than likely someday in the future, it will be important on some other street as well, because I can imagine there are a lot of other streets that are about the same age that there weren't deeds filed. That's why it's a state statute. It's because it's not uncommon.
Thank you. Councilor Irvin.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you for the pictures. I don't think I've stared at the packet material quite as long as I've stared at this one. I really enjoyed it, so appreciate that.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Moving on. All right. Item B, approval of loan for purchase of two 2023 Ford Explorer police vehicles. Staff report by Ms. Lights.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The Police Department has budgeted in this fiscal year to purchase police vehicles and the upfit for the police use. The city requested quotes for financing the purchase of the vehicles from 3 local banks. Financing is for $125,000 with a 5-year term. And as follows, the quotes came in. U.S. Bank Government Leasing and Finance was a 5.284% loan cost and a one-time $375 escrow fee. It would be structured as a tax-exempt municipal lease with title in the leasee's name. The vehicles held as security interest for the term. The lease is what they call a triple net, with the city responsible for taxes, maintenance, and insurance. Umpqua Bank came in at a percent of 5.76% and legal fees for bank legal counsel of $1,250, plus the city's own cost for legal counsel incurred, and required filing fees with the Oregon Municipal Debt Advisory Commission. This would be a full faith and credit tax exempt financing, and the reason for the legal fees would be a bond issuance. Banner Bank at 7.53% taxable or 5.91% tax exempt with a bank origination fee of $1,000, attorney fees incurred by the bank of $3,500 as well as the city legal counsel and other costs related to the closing. It's staff recommendation that the council authorize the city manager to accept the financing proposal and to execute any needed documents to protect the agreement with U.S. Bank Leasing and Finance as the most cost-effective for the city to purchase the two 2023 Ford Explorer police vehicles upfitted for police use. The cost is the total of the loan to be $125,000 with a budgeted expense which should read $7,152.86 per quarter with a per fiscal year expense of $28,611.44. I was sitting at the table this evening and I looked at that and I was like, wow, if I could get a loan for $30,000 for $125,000, that would be a great feat, but how gracious. That's just the per quarter cost that I gave as a per fiscal year cost.
Councilor.
Move that the council authorize the city manager to accept the financing proposal and to execute any needed documents to perfect the agreement with U.S. Bank Government Leasing and Finance, Inc. as the most cost-effective for the city to purchase two 2023 Ford Explorer police vehicles upfitted for police use.
Second.
Got a motion with a second. Any discussion? Councilor Savage.
Thank you, Mayor Soulsby. I asked the question on Friday, and I just want to bring this to light. I don't consider myself to be a cheap person, but I like to be frugal and find the deals. I make my own laundry soap because I don't want to have to pay for it. And so I thought to myself, my gosh, this seems like a lot. Is there a way that we could buy a used vehicle? And I really appreciated the comment back to me that it would cost more in maintenance and care than it would be to just be the sole owner right from the get-go. So I appreciate that comment. I hear you and I support this. Thank you.
Anyone else? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, item C, Historic Preservation Commission appointments. Staff report by Mr. Mongan.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Councilor Stannett was the chair of the subcommittee interviewing. I'm not sure if he wants to make the recommendation to council or if you want me to do that, sir.
I certainly can. Yes, thank you. It was small. Yeah. So do I need to read this whole thing here? No. Okay. So we were, first I'd like to thank all three of the applicants, including two incumbents, for their applications to the commission. It was, I kind of felt it wasn't really necessary to interview the incumbents without cause or without need to. They'd served admirably thus far. It was a pleasure to speak with Mr. Was it Hazeltine, sir? Excellent. A couple of Fridays ago. And when someone hands you some paperwork as impressive as his application was for this commission, it makes the job really easy. You just kind of make sure he's a real person and still wants to do it. And it's my pleasure to recommend, and ours as the committee to recommend Mr. Hazeltine to this commission. So.
I move that the city council, I'm sorry, where am I at here? Appoint Debbie Monsev to the term of June 12th to December 31st, 2023 to the Historic Preservation Commission, as well as Steve Kleiner for a term ending December 31, 2026, and Rick Hazeltine, is that how you pronounce it? Also to a term ending December 31, 2026.
Second.
We've got a motion with a second. Any discussion?
Yes, I just also want to compliment Mr. Hazeltine on the loving care he's put into the beach house restoration. It's really brought a treasure back to its opulence.
Thank you for serving. All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Concerns of council. Councilor Fleck.
Well, I guess I better dive in. So I guess I'm kind of disappointed to look out in the audience and not see any of the folks who spoke earlier about the incident at the community center. And I wanted to say that I'm frustrated by what's going on in our city and in the country. And Mr. Toddy is right that I did not behave as well as I could have. The problem is we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of folks not behaving as well as they could because they're frustrated. They're mad with others. They're venting. And I understand on one level. We all get passionate about issues that are important to us, worries about the future, whether they're economic or social problems. We just seem so divisive, and it just seems to be getting worse. And so with that, in an effort to do my part to make things better, I would like to apologize to Mr. Toddy for being snarky with him. But I also would like to say that there are ramifications for behaviors. I don't think anybody who watched the video of that event can say that people behaved well. Whether their intent was good or bad, there were some folks who were not behaving well. And I do agree that people have the right to protest, but I also believe that we need to try to get respect back in our dialogue. And so I'm not going to say that any one side of this issue is right. I'm not going to say that any side was wrong, but that all of us can do better. And it's interesting because I don't normally react. But I'm so frustrated to see that we're still being mean-spirited and hateful. This is not productive. This is not for us to affect change. This is not the way that we want to be as a community of neighbors who may disagree from time to time, but need to work together to make the city better. So once again, I will apologize, and I'm going to ask each of the folks that were in that event to also apologize, because this is important for not just for us as individuals, but it's important for our city and for our country. We have got to stop this. And I am very sorry that I sunk to that level tonight. Thank you. Oh, and I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I also would like to comment on the pictures. I actually brought this up to, I don't remember if it was the city manager or assistant city manager, but yes, the trash is absolutely unacceptable. So it needs to be cleaned up. And I want to say that, it's interesting because I run a nonprofit that works with the unhoused community and others. And I will share with you that I do not allow bad behaviors at our agency, and I certainly don't expect our city to allow bad behaviors within its jurisdiction. I believe folks need to be treated fairly and treated as any other citizen in town, but any citizen in town that had this sort of mess would have a nuisance complaint filed against them, and they would have action taken. So I guess what I'm calling for is that there's equal treatment for all in the city, and that this does not continue. I also had a situation here in the last couple of weeks where I had to call the police again about a client who's been trespassed over and over again, is currently trespassed and still continues to keep coming on the property. The problem here is this level of aggressive behavior and violence will continue to escalate if we allow it to continue without any retribution. So I do expect, folks who break the law to be held accountable. I do assume that we have jail space available and a judge that can put folks there if necessary. And I do expect that to happen if there are bad behaviors. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Savage.
Thank you, Mayor Solstein. I've got a couple things on my notes to chat about, but in keeping with the spirit of equality and having things be equal, I would like to comment on my point of order earlier. If we are not going to help people be accountable to the 5 minutes, let's talk about extending it. But just so everybody has that fair 5 minutes, it doesn't matter the topic, but let's stop at 5 minutes. So I would urge us to try and either do that or extend it. So when I heard the beeper show on Friday, I immediately thought, my gosh, what is going on at the unhoused camps? What is going on that I am not seeing? And without any notice and no provoking, I immediately went down there and I took a look for myself. And I talked with people who were incredibly kind and compassionate and tired and exhausted and hungry and emotional. And there's a few that have some really serious mental illnesses that kind of give everybody a bad rap. One woman I know came in tonight and see you recording, Cindy. She left without telling her story, and she had wanted to come tonight and tell her story, and I really hope that at some point she does. Another woman that I talked to works. She works really hard and earns money and earns income, but because of credit scores and history, she literally cannot get up on her feet, and she is trying to make ends meet and trying to maintain a sense of dignity. And I was really moved by how hard she's working. and she's working locally in our community, and she still can't get on top of it. So I again urge compassion. Each individual case is its own case. Let's not judge a whole spectrum of people by one person. Let's keep people accountable. I talked to Carry It Forward about these similar pictures. I don't know if these are the ones that I saw all over Facebook over the weekend, but there was one incident where somebody was told, my gosh, you have some stuff everywhere. You need to take care of this. So the answer to that was to literally go through all of their belongings and put it all out into the yard. And by the end of the day, it was tidied and clean. So something like this, we don't know the story behind this. This could be situational. This could have been over the course of an hour. This could have been something that sat out there for 2 days. We don't know that story. And for us to tell that story for somebody else, I think is wildly inappropriate because we don't have that story. So if we're curious about folks like this, let's go talk to them. You know, I think that we owe it to the folks of our community. One gentleman that I talked to was born and raised here. Life took him elsewhere. And now he's back here at the age of 50 years old, living in a tent and just trying to make ends meet, raking up somebody else's mess because he doesn't like it. And he's helping. He's doing what he can. And that's significant. So I just want to shed light on what I saw. And there were violations that I saw. I will not deny that. But the violations are being addressed. My understanding is that there are folks going out there, I believe, tomorrow to hand out notices. Hey, you've got to clean this up. Just like they would if it was your house or my house. That's how we behave. That's how we treat each other. We are kind. We are compassionate. And you're going to get more flies with honey by being kind than you are going to be by yelling at people and demeaning people. That doesn't get anybody anywhere. It doesn't make that person feel good who's doing it, because that's a lot of anger and aggression that you're holding within your own body, and it doesn't make the person receiving it make them feel like, wow, my mind is now changed. Let me change my behaviors. You know, there's a bigger picture. So I'd like to bring light to that. I'm really glad that it was brought up earlier today that this is Pride Month. I am a very proud and fierce ally. I think it's really important that we recognize that there are wonderful folks in our community who identify differently, however that may be. That doesn't necessarily mean you need to identify that way. It just means you need to be kind. So I proudly sport my rainbow nails in the month of June, every June. If you've known me for a couple of years, you probably know that I do this every June. I take part in any sort of diversity training that I can because I think it's important. That is what makes us amazing, is that we believe differently. And I am so thankful that we do. I do not want to be a part of a community that all believes the same way. So I'm really glad to have participated in a diversity, equity, and inclusion meeting up with the League of Oregon Cities this weekend. It was absolutely amazing to get this training up and going. I'm really excited to see where we go with this and see what comes out of this. Not every community is going to be the same. Our community is certainly not as liberal as, say, Portland or even Eugene, and that's okay. And that's okay. And so for me, I want to just say, I will love each and every one of you, no matter what, no matter if you believe what I believe, if you believe what you believe, if we believe differently, no matter what we are talking about, because I choose to appreciate individuals for who they say they are. And I appreciate that because I want somebody to appreciate me for who I am. So I'm going to treat them the way that I would like to be treated. I think that's it. Thank you for listening to me. I really appreciate it. Anyone else? Councilor Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. Spurred on by Mr. Mongan's presentation about FEMA floodplains, FEMA opened up additional opportunities to provide feedback on some of the work that they're doing, in particular about the Endangered Species Act, but I used that opportunity to provide feedback again about my concerns about the floodplain map updates and how those would impact people's insurance rates when we know historic floods have not yielded such water damage. So this last week, I provided my comments to Representative Suzanne Bonamici and FEMA. And the other thing, I also am hopeful that the Senate Republicans will end their walkout so that we can have a representative in the Senate who's actually going to work.
Anyone else? Councilor Irvin.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I had a conversation with a resident today who was pretty freaked out. I guess one of the RVs that's been moving every 72 hours caught on fire in front of her house, caught the trees on fire, and could have destroyed that neighborhood. And so that that's a concern. And I think we have stipulations. I'd like to revisit that ordinance about the parking. Was it an ordinance or resolution? Ordinance. And I'm sure staff is aware. I think they're aware of the incident. But really being vigilant about the condition of vehicles that are going around. It's very high fire danger. It doesn't take much for this whole community to be deeply affected by such things. So seems fitting because I am concerned about that.
I would also like to comment on the homeless situation with the shelters. That I've been getting a lot of phone calls and emails from constituents in the North Douglas area. And when we say that we need to be kind and understanding and realize that there's more to every story, I think we need to take into consideration those people as well that are neighbors now, that they are having some issues now with rats. And maybe because of the garbage, I don't know. But I did know when the shelter was over in the park at Trailhead, some of the businesses there were also having to call exterminators, and so I know it does happen. So I want to be sympathetic to those residents as well that are also constituents. And because those are very valid points. And I read the letter to the editor of a lady that lives on North Douglas as well that says she's very, you can read it for yourself, but it's kind of a sad situation for her, it sounds like. Also, had something kind of nice happen. I was the Forest Service and marshals reached out to me and wanted to meet, and so I brought Cottage Grove Fire Marshal along with me for his knowledge and his work in forestry, which proves very helpful for me to get his insight. And they were a wonderful group, and they expressed how they wanted to keep the lines of communication open with Cottage Grove and expressed how important Cottage Grove is to them and that we will not be forgotten in the transition that's going on. They also wanted to let us know that there is going to be a big timber sale up Sharps Creek and Hardscrabble, and unfortunately that's going to be happening during Bohemia Mining Days. And so that road up there will be closed off, and so wanted to let the community know that ahead of time so that you don't get trapped up there. So yeah, so it was a really great meeting, and we're excited to continue to talk more and just keep in contact. Anyone else? Councilor Merriday.
As a member of the Lane Workforce Executive Council, and we met for training with the whole Workforce Council, and we were able to make a number of connections among ourselves, and that was very valuable. And we'll be meeting tomorrow with one of our connections made there. And I go each month, and we talk about ways that we can support businesses that need workers and preparing workers so they will be prepared to enter business. There's a great facility in Springfield called Spark that I want a chance to get to go to. If you look it up, it's, I believe, downtown in the old the old mill site of no.
No, isn't it in the church behind the and over by the jail and everything in Springfield?
Yeah. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, the old one. That's where.
Yeah. So anyway, I encourage anyone else that can look it up, Spark Center, and they've got a number of programs there that sound very engaging for our youth.
Anyone else? No? All right. Report from the city manager.
I believe he's still back there in the back of the room. We have our newest police staff member probably snoozing on the floor. We don't have any oath of office for Fuji to read, but Fuji is our newest canine, a comfort canine. Captain wants to introduce her, a 2-year-old. She'll do anything for treats.
She's a little timid still. She's really adjusting well. She just runs up and down the hallways of the police department, so it's been really kind of neat. So, and she does look here. So she's my shadow.
And that's all I have.
All right. No city attorney. So we're going to pause this meeting, let the audience leave, and we have an executive session. The City Council for Cottage Grove will now meet in executive session to consult with staff designated to negotiate real property transactions. The executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.660E, which allows the council to meet in executive session to deliberate with persons designated by the governing body to negotiate real property transactions. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, we will return to open session, welcome the audience back into the room, and adjourn the meeting.
Almost done.
So.
You should do that now before somebody comes in.
What?
You should do that now before somebody else comes in.
Yeah. Okay, so moving out of executive session and back into regular session. Okay, perfect. Councilor Urban.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd love to make a motion. I move that the council authorize the city manager to prepare the documents in preparation for the purchase of Grace West Cleveland Street properties.
Second.
We have a motion with the second. Any discussion? No? All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Motion carries. All right. With that, we're adjourned. Oh.
One more thing. If any of you are interested or curious, if you want to sit down with me and go through the video of the community center incident and get the information as to exactly why certain trespass orders were issued and why they were the lengths they were, I would be more than happy to sit down with you. And, likewise, the photos, which I have not seen yet, but I've seen earlier photos that maybe the same ones, and I can explain exactly what's going on.
Great. All right. Thank you.
And you can take that paper since you made a motion to approve the moving forward with the purchase. It is no longer
Privileged.
Meeting adjourned.
What's that?